Welcome, inheritor, to Atlantis. Now that you've found your watchtower, it's time for you and your cabal to cross the abyss and use the invisible truth. I'm Big Mike, and this is the tutorial for Mage the Awakening, first edition. Mage the Awakening is a sequel RPG to Mage the Ascension, both of which were made by White Wolf. It got a second edition in 2016, but we just have the first edition of this particular game, so that's what we're going to be going with for the purposes of this tutorial. We'll do an update if we have to do one later. A lot of the core rules of this game are in the New World of Darkness rulebook, so if you feel there's any gaps in this particular system or tutorial, we recommend you consult that book and tutorial appropriately, and you'll see a link in the description for that. Ready? Let's hit it. So the mortal world is a malleable, shapeable thing that can be manipulated through something called the Supernal? Did I read that right? Huh. The Supernal realm. Without going too much into philosophy, it's basically the source code for reality itself. Thanks, 1D4chan. The idea is that a normal human being, or any human being for that matter, can't just access the Supernal realm because they'll basically get destroyed by the experience. However, mages, when they awaken, access one of 5 watchtowers. These watchtowers each have a different theme, but more accurately, they are made from the Supernal realm and represent aspects of it. And through that watchtower that you got to see, you're able to make spells based around the themes of those watchtowers. In addition, there's this huge gulf between the Supernal world and the real world called the Abyss. There's a mirror world, which is separated from our material world by something called the Gauntlet, and all this has to do with Atlantis. I don't even know. You have the normal 9 attributes for a White Wolf game that we've seen so many times up to this point. 3 that represent the mental, 3 that represent the physical, and 3 that represent the social. You also have skills that represent your knowledge of the occult, or firearms, or stealth. Just any particular skill you might be able to acquire. And of course, those are also broken up in the 3 categories I mentioned previously. Like so many other White Wolf systems out there, you roll pools of D10 based on the appropriate attribute plus skill. If you get an 8 or a 9 or a 10, those are successes. 1 is all you need, and 5 are considered dramatic success. Now, you can gain or lose dice depending on the modifiers at play, and if you somehow manage to get 0 dice, you're still allowed 1 dice to roll, but it's 1d10, you have to get a 10. 9 to 2 is a failure, don't get a 1. Ah, but this is Mage, which means you get a whole bunch more cool stuff to play with. Willpower does all the stuff it does in the normal base game, but also you can spend a point of willpower to give you +3 for any magic spell rolls that you make. Now, in the game, you have to pick both a path and an order. I will explain both. First up, paths. Remember those watchtowers from earlier? That's your path. There are 5 in total. Each one gives you access to 2 kinds of arcana, which are like schools of magic, for those of you who have a more traditional look at how that kind of thing goes. And there's 10 of those in total in the whole game. In addition to the 2 you get from your path, you also get 1 of your choice to give you a little bit more diversity in what you have to play with. Your order is a special mystical society that you're a part of. Each one has their own desires and motivations and goals for you to explore as you move up from being an acolyte, and each one gives you 3 rote specialties, which are modified skills that give you +1 to your dice rolls. There's also wisdom, which replaces morality from the core game. It determines how much mana you have to cast spells. However, the more of it you have, the more judicious you are about the spells you use, and a lot more careful too. You don't just willy-nilly do whatever you want with magic. Mana is mana, and it's used to cast spells. Pretty much the same as it goes anywhere else. Now for the part you are all waiting for, magic. Magic, mechanically, is relatively simple. You can either create an improvised spell from the book, or use a prepared one that you have called a rote spell. and I'll explain both. Rote spells are spells you have access to at all times as a mage. They're prepared spells that you've learned from different sources, like, say, a teacher or some magical random book you found. They cost more experience to make but less mana to use, and they're less likely to cause paradoxes. I'll explain paradoxes in a bit. To cast a rote spell, you roll the appropriate attribute, skill, and your arcanum for that spell. And arcanum is, of course, the rating you have for that school of magic or arcana magic. They just call it the arcanum. Improvised spells are spells that you don't have memorized, but are still part of your arcanum, and in theory you have access to them, as long as it's not more dots than your rank in the arcanum. You roll your gnosis plus your ranks in the arcanum for that. What is gnosis? Gnosis is a separate stat that represents your overall casting ability and your strength as a mage. Specifically how strong you can make your spells, how fast you can cast them, and how many of them you can cast. However, the higher that number is, the harder it is to hide your abilities. And now, paradoxes. You're a hot new mage, you're throwing down spells, you're altering reality, and of course, something bad happened. It's called a paradox. There's 5 flavors of them, depending on the spells you've cast, and there are also 5 flavors for which the GM can play with you. Merits and flaws are the same as they are in New World of Darkness, but obviously as a mage you have access to whole new ones that are really cool. Unfortunately, there's too many of them for me to reasonably list in this time, but you should check it out. Lastly, there's combat. Combat is the exact same in New World of Darkness. Do I have to? It's like the last part of the... Fine. It's simple. You roll to attack. If you manage to get at least 1 success, it damages the enemy, and every success you get damages the enemy. Of course, there are ways that the enemy has in defensive values that can reduce the dice you use to roll to hit them. And, as always, there are 3 types of damage: bashing, lethal, and aggravated. And since this is Mage, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of aggravated damage. And that is... Mage, the Awakening! A system of mystery and magic, and I encourage you to check it out when you have the time. Otherwise, check us playing it on the next D20 live stream. We'll see you then!